There are people who arrive at bedsides with something to give. They bring the performance, the energy, the jokes, the distraction, the specific gift of making a suffering person forget, for a few minutes, that they are suffering. This is a generous thing. It is not a small thing. The capacity to make someone laugh when laughter seems impossible is one of the more useful things a person can carry into a room where pain is present. But there is another kind of arrival. The kind where a person comes in, sits down, and simply stays. No performance, no distraction, no jokes. Just the specific, quiet, radical act of being present in a room where another person is present, without asking either of them to be anything other than what they are. Robin Williams understood both kinds of arrival. He was famous, across many years of visiting hospitals and rehabilitation centers and children's wards, for the first kind. He would arrive and become what the room needed: the comedian, the impressionist, the specific human explosion of laughter and warmth that could reach a sick child in a way that medicine could not always reach them. But on a specific afternoon in October 1993, at a children's hospital in San Francisco, he practiced the second kind. And a boy named Thomas Reeves, 8 years old, sitting at a window on the pediatric oncology ward, was the person who received it. Thomas had been admitted to the hospital 6 weeks earlier. His diagnosis was aggressive, and the treatment was ongoing, and the specific quality of his daily life had narrowed to the dimensions of the ward, the room, the window. He was a quiet child, not withdrawn, his nurses noted, but observant. He looked at things carefully. He noticed details. In a room with other children, his attention moved differently from the other children's attention, slower, more deliberate. The attention of a person who has learned to look at things carefully, because looking at things carefully is one of the few active things available to them. The window was his particular geography. From his bed, he could see a section of the street below, a corner of the park across the way, a slice of the San Francisco sky, with its specific morning fog and afternoon clarity. He looked at the window, the way people look, at a view from which they are temporarily separated from the world. It shows, with attention, and with the specific patience of someone who is waiting to return to what they are looking at. Robin Williams had come to the hospital that afternoon without specific advance planning. He came to children's hospitals in the way that some people stop to help at the side of the road, not as a scheduled professional obligation, but as a version of the same instinct that makes some people pull over and others drive past. He had been nearby. He came in. He had spent time on the ward with several children. He had done what he usually did. The voices, the impressions, the specific comedic chaos that turned a hospital room into something else for the duration of his presence. The children had laughed. The nurses had watched with the specific gratitude of people who have seen this happen before and know that what it does for a child in pain is not nothing. He was on his way out when he passed the room where Thomas Reeves was sitting at the window. He stopped in the doorway. Thomas was at the window with his back mostly to the door. He was looking out. He did not turn around. Robin Williams stood in the doorway for a moment. He looked at the boy at the window. He looked at the window, and at the street below, and at the slice of San Francisco sky visible from where he stood. He came in and sat down. He did not say anything immediately. He did not introduce himself. He pulled a chair to the window not directly behind Thomas, but beside him, at an angle that allowed both of them to see the window, and he sat. Thomas looked at him. He registered the face with the specific recognition of a child who has seen that face in films and on television. He looked at it for a moment, without the specific excitement that the recognition might have produced in another context. He looked back at the window. Robin Williams looked at the window. They sat in silence for perhaps 2 minutes. The ward was audible outside the room, the specific ambient sounds of a working hospital floor, the movement of staff, the distant sounds of other rooms. In this room, 2 people at a window, not talking. Then Thomas said, "Why aren't you doing funny things?" Robin Williams looked at him. He said, "Because I don't want to be funny right now." Thomas looked at him. He said, "What do you want to be?" Robin Williams was quiet for a moment. He looked at the window. He looked at the slice of sky visible above the buildings across the street, the specific San Francisco afternoon light that was doing something particular with the fog. At that hour, a diffuse brightness, the light from nowhere and everywhere simultaneously, the specific quality of light in a city built on a peninsula. He said, "Right now, I just want to be here." Thomas looked at him for a moment. Then he looked at the window. They sat in silence. The silence lasted approximately 20 minutes. Not a silence that required filling. Not a silence that either of them was working to manage or contain. The specific silence of two people who are looking at the same thing and do not have anything they need to say about it. Thomas looked at the street below. He pointed at something, a dog on a leash, or a person on a bicycle, or some specific ordinary detail of the street that had caught his attention. Robin Williams looked at where he was pointing. He nodded. Thomas looked back at the window. At some point during the 20 minutes, Robin Williams put his hand on the arm of Thomas's chair, not on Thomas's arm, on the arm of the chair. A proximity, a presence, something that could be felt without being a demand. Thomas did not move away from it. He continued to look at the window. They sat. When a nurse came to the door to check on Thomas, she found them both at the window, neither speaking, both looking out. She left without interrupting. After the 20 minutes, Robin Williams stood. He looked at Thomas. Thomas looked at him. Robin Williams said, "That's a good window." Thomas said, "Yeah." Robin Williams said, "I'll let you have it back." He walked to the door. Thomas watched him go. At the door, Robin Williams turned. He said, "You don't have to be anything in here." Then he left. Thomas Reeves has been alive for 38 years. He recovered from his illness, a long and difficult recovery that extended beyond the October 1993 hospital stay, that included setbacks and additional treatments and the specific years-long uncertainty of pediatric oncology. He is alive. He is well. He has a family and a career, and the specific ordinary life of a person who was once very sick and is now not sick. He has told the story of the afternoon at the window many times. Not publicly, he is not a public person, has no platform from which the story would spread, has no professional reason to attach his name to a famous man's kindness. He has told it to his wife. He has told it to his children, when they were old enough to understand what the hospital was, and what the window was, and what 20 minutes of silence means when you are 8 years old and have been in a hospital for 6 weeks. He tells it the same way every time. He does not tell it as the story of the time Robin Williams sat with him. He tells it as the story of the afternoon at the window. Robin Williams is in the story, but the story is about the window and the silence, and what it means to have someone come in and sit down and look at the same thing you are looking at, and not ask you to be anything other than what you are. He says, "He didn't try to cheer me up. He didn't try to make me laugh. He just sat there. He looked out the window with me. And that was the thing. That was the whole thing." He says, "You don't have to be anything in here." I was 8 years old and I didn't understand exactly what that meant, but I felt it. I felt it in the room. I felt it in the way he sat and didn't say anything. I feel it now when I think about it. You don't have to be anything in here. He is 38 years old. He thought about those words in August 2014 when he heard the news about Robin Williams. He sat for a while. He looked out the window of his house, which is in the East Bay now, a house he shares with his wife and his 2 children, with a window that looks out over a different slice of the world. He looked at it the way he learned to look at things carefully when he was 8 years old in a hospital room. Then he went to be with his family. The nurse who saw them at the window that afternoon, her name was Patricia Voss, and she had been working the pediatric oncology ward for 3 years. By October 1993, has said that she has thought about the moment. She looked through the door and saw the 2 of them many times since. She said, "I had seen him do the other thing, the performing thing. I had seen it work. I knew what it could do, but I had never seen him do this, just sitting, just being there." And what I thought when I looked through the door and saw them was, this is the other thing. This is the harder thing to give. She has been a pediatric nurse for 33 years. She has seen many people come and go from that ward, and from the wards she has worked on since. She has seen many kinds of kindness. She says, the rarest kind is the kind that requires nothing of the person you're giving it to. No response, no gratitude, no performance of feeling better. Just the presence, just the sitting. That's what I saw through the door. Two people at a window, one of them famous, neither of them saying anything. Thomas Reeves does not know that Patricia Voss remembers the afternoon. They have never spoken about it. Their paths did not cross again after his discharge from the hospital, in the ordinary way that the paths of patients and nurses do not cross again after discharge. She has continued in her work. He has continued in his life. They carry the same 20 minutes separately. What happened in that room on that October afternoon in 1993 was not a performance. It was not planned. It was not the result of any strategic thinking about what a sick child needs, or any professional consideration of the therapeutic value of presence. It was a man who stopped in a doorway, saw a boy at a window, and came in and sat down. It was 20 minutes. A window, a slice of San Francisco sky. You don't have to be anything in here. Thomas Reeves teaches his children to look at things carefully. He teaches them to sit with things. He teaches them that presence is a form of generosity, not the loud kind, not the kind that announces itself, but the quiet kind. The kind that arrives without announcement and sits down and stays and does not ask you to be grateful for it. He teaches them this the way he learned it, from an afternoon at a window, with someone who came in and sat down and looked at the same thing he was looking at and did not need him to be anything other than what he was. You don't have to be anything in here. That is the whole lesson. That was the whole afternoon. There is something particular about the window as geography for a person who is ill. The window is not the illness. It is the place from which the world that is not the illness is visible. It does not require the person looking at it to be well. It does not require anything of them at all. It is simply the view, the street, the trees, the sky, the ordinary movement of a world proceeding without them, which is both difficult to look at and necessary to look at, because the world proceeding without you is also proof that the world will still be there when you return to it. Thomas Reeves spent 6 weeks at that window before Robin Williams sat beside him. He knew the specific quality of the light at every hour. He knew the pattern of the street below, when the school children passed, when the delivery trucks came, when the man in the green jacket walked his dog in the late afternoon. He knew the way the San Francisco fog arrived in the early morning and the way the afternoon light broke through it, the diffuse brightness that was specific to that city and that hour. He was 8 years old, and he had become an expert in the view from his window, in the way that people become experts in the things available to them when other things are not. When Robin Williams pulled the chair beside him and sat down and looked at the window, he was not looking at something new. He was looking at what Thomas had been looking at for 6 weeks. He was joining the view rather than replacing it with something else. This is the specific thing Thomas Reeves has tried to describe in the years since. Not that Robin Williams came in, which was the remarkable external fact, but that when he came in, he looked at what Thomas was looking at. He did not redirect the attention. He did not perform something in front of the window to draw Thomas's eyes away from it. He sat beside the view and looked at it with him. Thomas has said, most people who came in wanted me to look at them. That was their gift themselves, their attention, their face turned toward me, something they were doing or saying or bringing. And that was good. I don't say it wasn't good, but he came in and turned toward the window. He looked at what I was looking at, and that was different. He has thought for a long time about why it was different. He has arrived, in his 30s, at something like an answer. It was the direction of the attention. Most kindness in a hospital room is directed at the sick person. The attention turned toward them, the energy aimed at them, the generosity pointed at them as its target. This is the natural direction of care. You face the person who needs care. But Robin Williams turned and faced the window. He made the view the subject rather than Thomas. He treated Thomas not as a patient to be cared for, but as a person who was looking at something, and he came and looked at it with him. It is a small distinction. It is everything. Thomas Reeves's children are 9 and 6 years old. He has not told them the full story yet. They are too young for the version that includes the illness and the hospital and the full weight of what 6 weeks in a pediatric oncology ward means. But he has begun to teach them what he took from it. He takes them to windows. He sits with them at windows, and they look at what the window shows, and he does not explain or narrate or direct their attention. He lets them look. He looks with them. After a while he says, "What do you see?" Not as a test, as a genuine question. He wants to know what they see, because he knows that two people at the same window see different things, and the different things they see tell you about the different people they are. His 9-year-old sees the birds. His 6-year-old sees the cars. He sees the light. He learned to see the light at a hospital window in 1993, sitting beside a man who came in and sat down and did not ask him to be anything other than what he was. Patricia Voss left the Children's Hospital in San Francisco in 2001. She has worked at 3 other facilities since, in Oakland, in Sacramento, and now at a pediatric care center in the South Bay. She carries 33 years of the specific knowledge that pediatric nursing accumulates, the knowledge of what children in pain need, of what their families in pain need, of what the people who visit them can provide and what they cannot, of the difference between the kinds of care that help and the kinds that, however well-intentioned, do not. She carries the afternoon at the window as one of her reference points. She says, "In 33 years I have seen many people try to give sick children something. Most of what is given is what the giver has available to give. Energy, distraction, warmth. These are good things. I have watched them work. I have watched children be reached by them in ways that I, as a medical professional, cannot always reach them. But the rarest thing I have seen, and I have seen it only a few times in 33 years, is the person who gives their presence without any other agenda, who comes in and does not bring a performance or a gift or a plan, but simply brings themselves and puts themselves in the room with the child and lets the child be what the child is." She says, "That afternoon at the window was the clearest example of that I have ever seen. He walked in. He sat down. He looked at the window with the boy. He stayed for 20 minutes. He said, 'You don't have to be anything in here.' And then he left. That is," she says, "the thing. That is the whole thing." In August 2014, Patricia Voss was at the Pediatric Care Center in the South Bay when the news came through. She went home that evening, and she thought about the afternoon. She thought about the doorway the moment she had looked through the door and seen them at the window and decided not to interrupt. She has thought about that decision many times. The professional assessment that what was happening in that room was more important than the scheduled check-in, and the interruption would cost more than it would provide. She is glad she did not interrupt. She thinks everyone involved is glad she did not interrupt. The 20 minutes that happened in that room happened because she looked through a door and recognized what she was looking at and left it alone. That is also a kind of care. Thomas Reeves does not know about Patricia Voss. He does not know she was at the door. He does not know she made the decision to leave them. He knows only the 20 minutes and the window and the presence and the sentence. "You don't have to be anything in here." He is 38 years old. He has carried that sentence for 30 years. He has carried it in the way that the sentences that reach us when we most need them are carried, not as a quotation, not as a piece of received wisdom, but as something that became part of the material of who we are. Something that changed, quietly and permanently, how we move through rooms where other people are suffering. He sits with people. He looks at what they are looking at. He does not try to redirect them. He stays. That is what he learned at the window. That is what Robin Williams gave him on an October afternoon in 1993 in a children's hospital in San Francisco when he stopped in a doorway and saw a boy looking out a window and came in and sat down. That is the whole of it. You don't have to be anything in here. There is a kind of story that does not require witnesses to be true. What happened at the window on that October afternoon exists entirely in the two people who were there and the one person who looked through the door and left without interrupting. None of them have sought to make it larger than it was. None of them have framed it as a lesson or a parable or a piece of evidence about Robin Williams' character. It was an afternoon. It was a window. It was 20 minutes of silence between a man and a boy who were both, in their different ways, looking at the world and finding it worth looking at. Thomas Reeves has said, "I didn't know, when I was 8, that this was something unusual. I thought maybe everyone had afternoons like this, where someone came in and sat down and looked at the window with you. It took years to understand that they don't, that it was specific, that it was a gift that required something to give it, not talent, not money, not fame, but the specific willingness to come in and sit down and not need anything to happen. That willingness, that is what it requires." Robin Williams had it that afternoon. He walked into a doorway, and he saw a boy at a window, and something in him recognized what the situation required. Not a joke, not a voice, not the specific energy that had filled every other room on the ward that afternoon. The situation required sitting down. The situation required looking at the window. He sat down. He looked at the window. That is the whole story. You don't have to be anything in here.